All right, perfect. So I was just telling the interns I've compiled all the questions that they sent me and put them on a Google Doc. I shared the link with them in the chat. You should be able to access it now. Tell me if you can't. Was that a thumbs up that I saw? Okay, awesome. There's a bunch of overlap in the questions that they asked. We have a lot of things that are front of mind for a lot of them. Most of our interns are hoping to go to law school, or if they're not hoping to go to law school and they're interested kind of in this diversity, equity, inclusion space at large, which is a little bit reflected in the questions that they sent in to you. I'd love for you to just introduce yourself. If you kind of have a presentation that you normally do with, a pace you normally go at, that's totally fine. If you want to go through the questions, whatever you feel most comfortable with.
All right, sounds good. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. And thank you also for the service you're providing to UCLI. We're a partner of UCLI, and we're very much supportive of UCLI's efforts and the advancement in legal education that they're really spearheading, I would say, in Utah. And so your work there is absolutely important. And so I am the Director of Admission and Financial Aid at the College of Law. I report to the Dean of Admission, who is Reyes Aguilar. And so I've been in my position about 5 years, not originally from Utah, though I am a graduate of our law program. So I've lived in a few other states, but I've been in Utah about 10 years. And so I not only bring, of course, my professional experience, I also, of course, have the student experience, though I would say that's a little bit dated, right? I mean, I went to law school I graduated about 5 years ago. And so many things have changed in our law program and our curriculum since I graduated. And so I feel like even though law has a very notorious reputation of moving at the pace of molasses, legal education does not necessarily follow that pace. And so I'm here, of course, to impart information about our law program. And I would say, generally speaking, I did take a look at all of the questions you submitted. And so I do have a presentation to share. And my hope is that I will cover a substantial portion of the questions that were submitted with this vetted slide, PowerPoint presentation. So if I can share that, I would love to be able to do that in, of course, the brief time we have today.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so let me try this. I hope you don't see, about 15 pages here. All right. So you should be able to see the PowerPoint, yes?
Yeah, we can see like the sidebar and then also like the main page.
All right, so let me do the present review. Is that good?
Yeah.
All right, so I think so, right. I have the other window here. All right, and feel free to, this is a meeting setting, so feel free to submit questions as I'm going through this information. I have absolutely no problem with that. No need to wait till the end. As you could see, I mean, I only have about 5 or 10 slides of information, though I would say they're pretty loaded. And so moving on here and just kind of following up on some of the information I've already indicated. So who comprises our College of Law Office of Admission? And so I've mentioned Dean Aguilar. He's been there for nearly 30 years, right? So he has a substantial amount of experience in law school admission, as well as just legal education, generally speaking. And then the person, in the event that you choose to apply, that you will have most engagement with regard to your actual application is Samantha Nyborg. She's our program manager. So she's responsible for processing your applications. And so this is kind of relevant to one of the questions that was submitted about what I would say is different, right, from or distinguishes the undergraduate application process from the legal application or the JD application. So what is the JD? JD is a Juris Doctor. That is what you're wanting to, of course, earn for the purposes of giving you an opportunity and making you eligible to sit for the bar exam. Why is that important? Because the bar exam is the actual, once you pass the bar exam, you can earn the license to actually represent someone before a court of law. And so the Juris Doctor alone is not sufficient to be able to practice law. And if you know some of this information, I apologize, right? Everyone comes in with their very different knowledge base. And so I want to make sure that we're covering information for everyone's benefit here. And so I'll return to the distinguishing factors a little bit later, but one of the things you want to keep in mind as you're employing a strategy with your application process for the Juris Doctor program, and the key word there is strategy. You definitely need to be very mindful about how you're approaching the process. It is not, I would say, something that is just, hey, I'm going to slap this together tomorrow night, because some of these components, which we'll cover, are going to take substantially longer. They're just not quite that simple to put together overnight. And so my recommendation and our recommendation as someone begins their law school exploration process with the intent to apply, right? With the intent to apply, they've already kind of done some exploration. You guys are involved with UCLI, probably have had some engagement with some attorneys, possibly some judges, have seen some potential career opportunities with regard, or career paths, right? So, which is wide and varied. And so one of the things you have to absolutely keep in mind with all of the institutions that you intend to apply to are the dates and deadlines. And the reason you want to keep this in mind is because you kind of want to then work backwards with regard to what comprises the application itself, right? And so with us, for this 2021-2022 admission cycle, which begins, as you see here, September 1st, this is when our application actually opens. Some of you had posed questions regarding our early decision program. And so for the benefit of all, we have two application processes, early decision and regular decision. The distinguishing factors between these two are about 2 to 3 points. The first being that under early decision, this is a binding program. What does that mean to you? What that means is you're committing to enrolling in our law program in the event that you are in fact admitted. And so you really have to think about, am I completely committed to the University of Utah SJ Quinney College of Law at the exclusion of all others? And that's really something you really have to think about. And I apologize if I'm looking this way. I can see your lovely faces on my other screen. And so I'm gravitated to look this way, even though the presentation is this way. So I apologize. But that is absolutely something you want to think about. Am I committed to enrolling in this program, irrespective of all of the other 200 American Bar Association institutions that are in the country? So I will say that early decision is, it attracts a small pool of applicants. The overwhelming majority of applicants apply under regular decision. And so if it's a binding process, then you might wonder, well, why would someone be incentivized to apply under early decision? And part of the reason that is because we guarantee a merit on entrance scholarship upon admission to anyone who's admitted under early decision. It is very specific. It covers roughly about 50% of eligible tuition and fees over the course of a 3-year period. And so it is inherently renewables so long as you're meeting the conditions that are associated with the scholarship, which are very baseline. What I mean by that is, so to stay in our program, once you have enrolled and to remain academically eligible to remain in the program, you have to maintain a 2.5 cumulative GPA. That is the academic baseline you have to meet or condition to maintain your scholarship. The other condition revolves on essentially character and fitness issues, right? And so, if you're behaving well, there's no concern, right? You're keeping your hands to yourself. You're not, making inappropriate comments and things like that that would get you into trouble, then you're fine, right? So this is why I'm saying their baseline. It's important to cover that information because there are some institutions, irrespective of early decision, that within their scholarships have a heightened academic condition for you to maintain your scholarship. So that's something you may want to ask as you're exploring other institutions as well. And so that is what early decision is, right? So 1, you're guaranteed a merit on entrance scholarship. 2, you're also committing to enrolling in our program. So that application is due earlier. It's October 29th. We do not begin the regular decision review process until November 1st. I like to highlight this because there is some confusion, in part because we open our application September 1st. We don't begin the regular review process until November 1st. So in the event, which inevitably every single year, we always have a handful of applicants who submit a complete application September 1st under the regular review process. We don't begin even touching those applications until November 1st, even though we are on what's called a rolling admission process. And so that's easily an 8-week period, right? In addition to that, with regular review, it can be anywhere between 6 to 8 weeks starting November 1st for us to render a decision, okay? And go ahead and ask your questions. I don't mind being interrupted. I know there's a hand raised. Go ahead.
Okay. So I just had a quick clarifying question about early admission. Is it, if you apply early admission, is it like you either get accepted or you get declined, or is it possible to be deferred to like a regular admission like timeline, if that makes sense?
Yes, absolutely. So under early decision, we only render 2 decisions, and they are exactly what you just outlined. You will either be admitted or we will process your application for review under regular decision. That would also be a distinguishing factor between early decision and regular decision, because under regular decision, we will follow one of our traditional 3 decisions, which is admit, waitlist, or deny. And so you could see here another incentive. Don't ask me why. Don't ask me why. But another incentive for some folks who apply under early decision is because we guarantee having a date, right? We have a specific date when notifications will be delivered. What notifications are those? We just discussed those, right? You're admitted or we're processing your application for regular review. And let me be clear, that's exactly what it means. What it means is we are reviewing your application again under regular review. It does not mean you've been denied early decision, because we don't have that as a decision that we're making under that program. So let me just be clear, because there's some confusion about, I was denied under early decision. I really want to get my decision now that it's been processed under regular review. So no one's denied under or early decision. And then with regular decision, we have 2 important deadlines, January 15 and March 10. You could see January 15 is our priority consideration. As you're speaking to schools, let me go back. As you're speaking to schools, ask them what this means. What does priority mean? So for us, what that means is that anyone who applies by January 15 and is subsequently admitted is guaranteed first round merit on entrance scholarship consideration. That's what that means for us. And that's why that date is so important. And so anyone who applies between January 16 and March 10 does not necessarily have that same guarantee. It is, we make our very best effort to ensure that everyone who's admitted has equal opportunity for merit on entrance scholarship consideration, but timing is very key, right? And so I think you can see why starting here before we even discuss the application is so important, because you have to really understand how the process, how the timeline works, right? Any questions here? Yep. All right. So we've been talking about the JD application, right? So what comprises the JD application? And this is where you'll see, I would say, some overlap with the undergraduate application, right? So personal statement. The personal statement I would say it's more commonly understood as like a statement of interest of sorts and with undergraduate admissions. But this is very important. And so for us, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. So for us, so some of your questions was like, well, what should I include? What do you really like to see as a reviewer, I would say, in the personal statement? And the number one thing we want to see is that you're following instructions. Really, I realize this sounds very, very basic, but I think you can understand the value of following instructions in our industry, right? Because there are, of course, rules of procedure and things of that nature that you're inherently going to have to follow in the law, right? Even as you're submitting, for instance, a pleading, things like that that are very much associated with law, they're going to have their parameters. So for us, follow instructions. We're going to have a series of instructions before you even open the app. So when you open the application, the very first thing you're going to see are a series of instructions. And so for us, our personal statement really focuses on what you want to tell us. So our little prompt there will ask you to draft a 2-page document typed no smaller than 10-point font, preferably, covering an area of your particular interest. Ideally, it's letting us know what's motivating you to go to law school, and essentially what is going to be that anchor, right? That's going to keep you going when the tough gets going, right? And so that's what our personal statement really focuses on. I'm very clear about that because part of the reason I began by discussing the instructions is because even though most of us law schools have a very standard, I would say, and uniform application process, we're all looking for very different things. And so the personal statement, for instance, at the University of Las Vegas may be very different. They may be interested in knowing why Las Vegas, why their school. We don't necessarily have that particular interest. We ask in the application form itself, what motivated you to apply to our law program? And that's the appropriate place for us for you to include that information. And so this is difficult to say how it's going to be approached by each school because we all approach it slightly differently. So just keep that in mind. And remember, go back to the instructions. What are they asking me to describe? Some of the questions revolved around, I would say, common pitfalls, right, of the personal statement. Number one, probably every admissions officer's pet peeve is, and this is why I want to attend, USC law school. Well, great, you're applying to the University of Utah. To us, that's very careless, right? And so we're not surprised that folks apply to more than one school. You absolutely should. The average application or the average number of applications nationwide is 5 to 7. So it's absolutely normal, but be very diligent with, reviewing the personal statement. Have other people review your personal statement. Understand that you have some points you want to communicate to us. If someone else isn't pulling up those or isn't gleaning those points from your personal statement, I guarantee you that it is highly likely that we're not going to get that from your personal statement either. And so you should draft it. You should have 1 or 2 folks review your personal statement, maybe up to 3. Definitely one of those at minimum should be reviewing for punctuation. And bear in mind, right, if for us, if our expectation, your personal statement is an indication of your writing potential, your writing quality, right? And so that's important to us because this industry is very writing, reading, drafting heavy, right? And so you're earning a bachelor's degree. You should, and some folks are earning, you know, advanced degrees, graduate degrees. They should write like so, right? And so keep that in mind. So a resume, some of the questions asked about, you know, kind of highlighting things with resumes and things of that nature. What should I be involved in? Should I go into a job that is, you know, has some kind of legal affiliation? That is absolutely only important if you want to do that. We would never want you to not take advantage of an opportunity that was brought to you simply because it was not necessarily associated or affiliated with the legal industry. That is absolutely unnecessary. You should absolutely be doing things you want to be doing. Although I would say that you want to show something for it. So I can tell you, we had in the past this applicant who had this really amazing job. She worked for Carnival, the oh my gosh, the cruise line. I mean, how cool is that, right? She was working for Carnival at this cruise line. She got to travel all over the world. No, I don't want you to give up that opportunity to go work as a paralegal, right, at a law office where you could do that a year later or 2 years later. You see what I mean? And so if you've been given these incredible opportunities to explore, absolutely take advantage of those things. You know, there's a reason that particular job stuck in my mind, right? Because it was different. They're not trying to follow this really non-existent cookie cutter way to get to law school. Everyone gets to law school in a very different way. And so just keep that in mind. With your resume, however, don't make assumptions. And what do I mean? And so there are some folks who, so I mentioned paralegal earlier, right? But say we have our own paralegals, and then there's paralegals at UCLI. There's paralegals at a major international law firm downtown. And so if someone, you know, has a bullet point, paralegal from this date to this date, and no description of their job responsibilities, that's not helpful. You want to include those that description. Why? Because a paralegal for us, UCLI, and this law firm may be different. Their job responsibilities might be different. So show me what those are, right? So don't make assumptions that we know just because there's it's a known term or a known title that we absolutely know what you mean by I was this here. Tell us what that is. Tell us what your degree of responsibilities are. And that would be the same for any volunteer experience, as well as any externship or internship opportunities. Okay. And so this is a way for you to highlight those things. I realize that this may sound very basic, but really what I'm trying to do is put you in my shoes as a reviewer, what I do, right, on a regular basis, which is review applications. And so we, of course, do require a baccalaureate degree. And so I suspect that most of you are seeking that now, if not getting ready to end that and maybe potentially have pursued other things as well. This is something that I would say is very different from the application process you may have experienced at the undergraduate level. One of the entities that you will become very intimately in working with, I would say, start working with it very intimately, is the credential. This is the Law School Admission Council. Everyone's heard of, anyone not heard of the Law School Admission Council? Okay, so the Law School Admission Council, right? They are an entity that basically they have a lot of very different entities or very small departments, and so one of them is responsible for administering what we require, most of us law schools require, as the entrance admission exam, which is the law school admission test. So they have a division that's responsible for that. They then also have a division called the Credential Assembly Service, but here again, this is just the Law School Admission Council. They're responsible for processing applications, JD applications, as well as other applications usually associated with law schools, but at a higher level, I would say. And so you actually never send anything directly to us. The only thing we get is your final application, essentially. All of your interaction will be with the Credential Assembly Service. Our application, if you went to our website today and clicked, apply now, it is actually going to reroute you to the Credential Assembly Service / Law School Admission Council website, because that's where our application lives. Okay. And so we require, as part of your application, this report. So what is the report? The report itself includes your undergraduate, graduate transcripts, letters of recommendation. We require 1 letter of recommendation, but we'll accept up to 3. Part of what comprises the law school admission test, or the LSAT, is a writing sample. And so we require that writing sample to be included as part of the actual report itself. And it is part of the report. It also includes your LSAT scores and any language tests that might be associated. So on top of all of this, there is what's called the Credential Assembly Service banner page. And I kind of brought you a sample here. This is a fictitious person, so don't worry that I'm sharing improper information or information that you should not be seeing. But I want you to see what we see, right? And so this is a mock-up of what a law school admission report banner page looks like. So this is the first page, and this is the second page. And I apologize for how small this looks, but this gives you an idea, right? So we see your institutional data, basic demographic information, your undergraduate major, anything here, right, that was noted on your transcripts. So, you could see this person had academic honors. This school actually ranked their students, but then I could also see academic action and what term that was, right? So things like that. And anything related to what's going on with that person's association with the institution, right? So this person still has some kind of financial obligation. This also tells me how you performed, just GPA, cumulative GPA and term GPA, either by semester or by year. For this particular person, it's really more, it's more varied because they had such a wide range of undergraduate experiences that you could see here, right? So you could also see that this person had a master's degree. And so this is kind of what this looks like on the very top part, mostly academic. The second part, we could see LSATs, right? The scores. So the LSAT is ranged from 120 to 180. So you could see where they were performing in the 3 times they sat forward, their percentiles, the date of the administration. Here, the C is telling me that they canceled that particular exam. A is telling me that they didn't show up for the exam that they were committed to sitting for. And then this is giving me the average. This right here is called the Lsat range or score band. So this is average, right? This is per test. So they scored a 150, 162. This is taking into consideration usually a 3 to 4 point margin of error. So if they scored a 162, it's telling me that they could have scored as low as a 159, but as high as a 165. And so that's some of the information that we take into consideration as we're looking at your LSAT, right? So this number alone is not everything. This is telling us a little bit more about the story there, right? So this is what this looks like. We like to show this because folks, I think sometimes don't fully, I think they feel like it's so obscure, right? Because they don't know exactly what we're looking at, but now you have a better idea. Everything else you should know what I'm looking at, right? Because you're hopefully drafting the personal statement. It should be your authorship for sure. We include that in your instructions. The resume should be yours, right? You should know how you performed in your undergraduate program. And so then some of the questions asked, how do you treat multiple LSAT scores? And so the first thing you should know, right, is we could see them, right? We could see kind of everything here. And so how we treat them is that by default, our policy is that we will evaluate the application based off of and render a decision off of the highest score. But if there are circumstances that lead us to believe, and by that, what I mean, if there are other things in the application that signal that what I need to take into consideration is really the average score, we're going to base our decision off the average score. But know that by default, our policy is we're basing our decision off the highest score, which I feel like sometimes is a moot point because it's not necessarily, always going to be the same. But I would say the majority of the time, we're basing our decision off the highest score. And then finally, right, application form, we have a $60 application fee. No one in this call should be paying the application fee. Email us. We're happy to give you an application fee waiver. Ask for those from institutions. We don't ask that you provide any information, but some institutions do expect that you have some kind of financial need, or they base it on merit. So, cumulative undergraduate GPA and possibly LSAT score, they base it off of that to see if they're willing to give you an application fee waiver. Ask for it. It costs you nothing and it could save you tons of money. And then optional statements here, right? So diversity and addendums or addenda. The diversity statement distinguishes from the personal statement in that here, really we're looking for, why do you want to go to law school? Why are you, wanting to commit to, why are you wanting to commit to the legal industry? Here we're asking you basically by virtue of your experiences, your background, education, things like that, what you're bringing to the institution, right? So these are very different. Now, sometimes what you want to discuss here is going up here, which is fine, right? But what that's telling you is maybe I don't need this because I'm already talking about it here. These should complement each other, but they should not be regurgitating the same thing. So keep that in mind. Here again, this is why you want to be very intentional about what you're discussing, right? Addendum. So some of the questions asked about, when is it appropriate to submit an addendum? Some institutions will provide instructions of when it's appropriate for you to submit this. I could tell you from my experience, what I've seen most often, because we don't have any specifications on when you should use an addendum. This is essentially, if you want us to take into consideration other information that you've not already provided, right? And that's how you should think about this, right? Personal statement is not your resume. Transcripts are not your personal statement. Application form is not a diversity statement. And the reason I say that is because all of these serve a very different function in the application process, and that's how you should treat it. And so the addendum, what I have seen most often is that folks use it to usually offer more narrative on what they perceive to be a deficiency, I would say, in their application, which could be an unsatisfactory LSAT score for them. I won't say for us, for them, or perhaps more information concerning their undergraduate performance or graduate performance if they sought an advanced degree. And so that is what I have often seen. And the reason they're using an addendum is because they're not outlining some of that information or details in their personal statement. And so, which is completely okay. I actually, as a reviewer, I prefer to see that information here, unless it's really the theme of your personal statement. So any questions here? Nothing? All right. So we've taken a look at that. So what are we looking for? This is by far it's the question I get to answer every single day. It is by far the most frequently asked question. So as we're reviewing applications, this is what we're looking for. You know, has this person demonstrated the academic skill set? And I mean, not so much, I'm not a big fan of this word, but I would say, you know, demonstrated an academic skill set necessary to competently perform in law school. Really what we're asking is, are you going to be able to go through the entire program? This is absolutely important. You know, relative to everyone who's applied during the cycle, you know, have you demonstrated the academic skill set and intellect that is how do you perform relative to everyone else who's applied? This is what we're asking you. And this is important because we seek to enroll a class of no more than 100 students. We certainly receive more than 100 applications, right? And so this is why this is important. And frankly, because these are, in the event that you're admitted and you choose to come to our program, these are going to be your classmates. So how are you going to perform when you're in class with them and things of that nature? And 3, what more is this candidate bringing to law school, right? Here, by virtue of life experience, background, and interests, kind of hinting on some of those themes that surround, like, the diversity statement. So what are the things that we are looking at? Essentially, really, this is what you need to have to be successful in law school, right? You need to have the ability to think critically, to be able to analyze, synthesize. And, you know, you have to be curious because the law can be very dry sometimes, right? So you have to definitely have intellectual curiosity. You have to have personal skills that involve that you're highly motivated. This in part is because, you know, being a law student, there's a reason that they say, you know, you never sleep. That's not necessarily true. That's physically impossible, right? But you wake up doing possibly schoolwork and go to sleep doing schoolwork. And that's just because law school can be very demanding. And this is a distinguishing factor from the, you know, bachelor's program. In a bachelor's program, right, maybe you don't have to read. Maybe you don't even possibly need the text for a class. Here, you can't do the work without reading the class. You can't learn the material. You can't develop your critical and analytical thinking skills without going through that process. We were just in an event for our admitted students yesterday, and our dean commented how her mom went to, so her mom is an alum of a law program, and how her mom spent 1 hour on a single sentence deconstructing the meaning of that when she was in law school. I'm not suggesting that you're going to be in the same boat. I'm highlighting what is an example of the complexity of some of the material that you're going to be covering. This is why, you want to stay motivated. You have to have these skills to be able to function, in society, generally speaking. So we want to make sure that you do have some of these traits. Integrity and honesty, these are, like I said, these are more soft skills. This is more academic. Communication, definitely more academic. Writing ability. This is why we take a look at your writing sample. This is why we take a look at your personal statement, because we want to see how effective you are in communicating ideas in a written manner, right? And then task management. This is going to be kind of reflected in your resume, right? So how well have you managed all of your responsibilities and your ability to work with others? This is absolutely important. So here, all of this stuff, you can think of them as softer skills. These things, more to a certain degree, academic and work ethic in nature. So then when we're evaluating applications, and this goes to the question of what are you looking for? We are looking for all of this. And it's not as if I have this in front of me every single time and checking, all right, Lsat score, undergraduate GPA. That is not what I'm doing as a reviewer. That is not what we're doing as reviewers. We're taking a look at all of these factors. And where are they? They're in your application, the content of your application. So academic, leadership and extracurricular, demographic and diversity factors. And so one of the questions was like, how are we committed to having a diverse class, right? And these are some of the factors we take into consideration as we're evaluating applications. And then any notable accomplishments. So this is what we're looking at, what we're looking for when we're evaluating applications, while also keeping these questions in mind.
Could I ask a quick question?
Absolutely.
So going back to the page, I think right before this one, where you kind of discussed the academic skill set, how are you evaluating all of these things? They seem obviously connected to each other, but pretty individual. So how do you actually evaluate them?
Right. So this isn't actually what we're looking. This is the criteria right here.
Mm-hmm.
These are the things that I, as an applicant, would want to have, right? Possess when making, submitting reflect, right, on my application, right? Because these are things you need to have as a law student to be successful, right? So this is really this is forward thinking, right? Forward looking into, okay, I'm a law student. What do I need to be successful in law school? This is what you need. All of this.
So are you like on your personal statement, are you, do we say I'm reliable and trustworthy, or do you talk about experiences that you had that reflect that reliability?
I see what you're asking. Yeah. So this is going to be more like letters of recommendation. What do other people have to say about you? Right. You can't really show me that you're honest and that you have integrity, but your recommenders can. They can tell me how you behaved in a certain situation, right? So this is where it's important for you to develop those relationships and foster those relationships, particularly in your undergraduate program, with your immediate supervisors, if you're interning, externing, or working, as well as faculty, right? For folks who are applying directly out of their undergraduate program or are possibly at the most 2 years removed, we do expect to see an academic letter of reference. And in part, it's because you're applying to an academic program, right? And so we want to be able to see what a faculty member who has observed you in that setting has to say about you. Now, if you're like 4 or 5 years removed, we don't expect you to maintain those relationships. But But I would say professional letter recommendation is going to be the strongest. The weakest letters of recommendation are going to be those coming from a personal source. And what do I mean? So I will sometimes, as a reviewer, see letters of recommendation coming from, for instance, a judge who is a family friend of this applicant's parents. And so they saw this applicant grow up, but they've never observed them neither in an academic nor professional setting. So all of the qualities they have to focus on are mostly really right here, not even here, usually just here. So this is why I would say that personal letters of recommendation are by far the weakest, because they have not much to share or impart surrounding anything here. Does that answer the question, Casey?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
And so this is why it's important to understand, what is the function of each of these things they're asking me to submit. And so that would be, of course, one of the functions of the letters of recommendation. One of the other questions was, what weight is employed or assigned to the personal statement. And so we don't have, so I'm not here and saying, okay, Lsat is 25%, other degree, difficulty of college work 5% or 10%, nothing like that. That's not how we function. And so very much this is going to be very important. I want to be very, very transparent in saying that. But you help us by giving us everything else, because you're giving us the story. If I'm looking just at this isn't telling me everything about the applicant. I actually tell people, because they're very convinced that it's just LSAT and GPA. And I tell people, you know what, our system can run a report, and my life would actually be very simple if I just had to run a report and say, based off LSAT and GPA, all right, admit, deny, waitlist. But that's not what we do. We literally read everything. Every applicant, and that's our effort to employ a holistic review process. Now, it's important for you to ask the questions, with schools, how are you treating this? Because for some schools, they do tell you, we have these thresholds. If you're not meeting this baseline threshold with median LSAT score, median undergraduate cumulative GPA, you're going to have a hard time being admitted. And the reason that is because you also have to balance that with the volume of applications. How many applications are we receiving, and how many people are we seeking to enroll? Then it might be a place where they are having to impose kind of like these stricter thresholds that someone has to meet. Whereas with us, not necessarily, right? But relatedly, I would say for the class that we're enrolling right now, their median LSAT score is going to be somewhere between a 162 and a 164. And a median undergraduate cumulative GPA is somewhere between a 378, 385. So we won't have the solid final numbers until probably closer to September. And so these are some helpful websites that we like to share. All of these are have some kind of legal affiliation. Well, of course ours, right? It's our law school admission council. I touched on them. They are the very #1 folks that you want to start engaging with if you're wanting to apply to law school. And then these folks have some kind of program, usually geared at undergraduate students, to kind of help to basically like some kind of pipeline program to help you get to law school, help you understand what you're doing in law school, what lawyers do. And then Access Lex Institute, they also have a pipeline program. It's based out of DC, but they're actually one of our financial literacy partners. They're a nonprofit institution or organization, and they focus a lot of their efforts on financial literacy, which is absolutely important. I mean, I can't stress that enough. And so we're very much, I would say, fans of the work they do. But
Can I
that
ask one more
essentially,
question?
yes, absolutely.
And tell me if this is like kind of too deep. So I noticed in the second to last slide that you talk about, when you talk about criteria, and you take into consideration gender, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, etc., like these kind of diversity markers. And at UCLI, we're really familiar with working with those types of demographics and identities because that's our population of interest as well. Something that I've struggled with kind of theoretically, and as I've started applying to different types of grad schools, is like, how do I speak to the impact that my experience as a woman or my experience as a queer person has had on my motivation or academic success or academic failure? How do I speak to that in a way that's for lack of a better term, like not off-putting? Because I feel like I would worry sharing personal statements that can sometimes be super personal, obviously the personal statements, but like sharing it with someone I know, because I don't want them to know about all the stuff I've been through, but I also know that it's been really important to get me to where I am, if that makes sense. So how have you seen students navigate that kind of tricky balance of wanting to be, professional and upfront about who they are and what motivates them, but also there's a level of vulnerability and honestly, like not really understanding all the reasons that like my being a woman has impacted me. I don't know if that makes sense, but like, how do you approach speaking
Absolutely.
to that in your application?
Right. And so one, don't be shy. Two, only share what you feel comfortable sharing and navigate. The question is, right, like, how do I navigate that? And so understanding that there is a balance to be had there. One, don't be concerned about lack of professionalism if you're exposing vulnerability, because we're humans. So one of the questions was, how does the admission committee work? And those are absolutely questions you should be asking. So to answer that question real quick, not to deviate from your question, but our admission committee is comprised of rotating law school faculty and the dean of admission and myself. And so we all have a law background. That's important for you to know, because then you understand who your audience is, right? And so we're humans, right? And so understand that the personal statement is intended to be what it sounds like, personal. And it's okay for you to be outlining and highlighting all of these different things that intersect, right? That make us us, and that's completely okay. And don't worry about being unprofessional. I will say there's one personal statement of the hundreds I have read that has stuck with me for some time, and that's the only one I could actually say was unprofessional. And it's just because the content was absolutely inappropriate. And so just to give you some context, a lot of what was discussed was a health experience that the applicant had. And one of the, I'm smiling because it's so hard, because I'm just thinking back at the personal statement, but a lot of what was shared was, they were talking about wetting the bed, right? And so, like, I get it once, I get it. Like, I don't need you to talk about in 2 pages about wetting the bed, right? Yes, it was a side effect, right? And so then you have to be very careful about understanding, right, okay, I want them to understand the degree of, for instance, suffering, right? And for this particular applicant, the suffering I experienced with this health issue, and we get it. We also understand that you only have 2 pages. We're asking you for 2 pages for a reason, right? And so we understand that you're not going to be able to get into too much detail. I mean, often you also have an opportunity to submit the diversity statement, but you see what I mean? The reason I'm saying that particular personal statement comes to mind as very unprofessional is because of the extent of graphic detail that was provided about wetting the bed, right? Like, no, like we get that was a side effect. We don't understand why you're giving us 2 pages of this, right? And so this is very, of course, different from what you're saying in that, but also very related. One, tell us what you want to tell us. If these things have shaped and defined you, absolutely share it. Absolutely share it, because that's what we're seeing, right? You saw in the criteria, right? The demographics, right? The diversity and demographic factors that we consider, absolutely talk about. They're absolutely wonderful personal statements. Absolutely. Like I told you, I've read hundreds of personal statements. That is the only one I could say, wow. Like literally when I was done reading it, that was my reaction, was wow, right? Because here again, understand your audience. Is it appropriate, right? Is that level of graphic detail appropriate? And considering what you're talking about, right? I don't think any of the things you highlighted would get to anywhere near that level. So, but I also do want to emphasize that only share what you absolutely feel comfortable sharing. We understand that life has not been easy for a lot of people, right? Life has not been easy, but you should also not feel like, oh my gosh, if I didn't survive this awful, car wreck, and then on top of that, I was in the desert, and then I had to walk for 50 miles to get water. Like, that's not what it takes to get to come to law school. That's absolutely absurd, right? But I feel like sometimes people feel like, oh my gosh, I have to be able to do cartwheels blindfolded and without hands, and no. And I understand that our industry has not been the greatest in making everyone feel absolutely welcome and things like that with regard to the application process, having to go through these hurdles to go through the application process. But yeah, absolutely think about, and this goes to being very thoughtful and intentional with what you're wanting to tell us, what you're wanting us to know about you. And why also reading the instructions is important, because sometimes those help to give you defined parameters of what to discuss. I think, frankly, one of the toughest things of our application process is the personal statement, because we let you talk about whatever you want, including wetting the bed, clearly. And so, what we're trying to do there is having an understanding of your use of judgment. So this very much goes to your question about striking that right balance. And this is also where it's important to have someone to read it, right? And say, hey, maybe here, let's cut down 5 of these paragraphs and focus on something else, because perhaps this isn't, if you want me to get A, B, and C out of, to glean these 3 points out of your personal statement, I'm not getting that from this, because all I'm getting is this, right? Does that help? It's more abstract, I realize.
Yeah,
it's
and
much
I think
more abstract.
The question's like a little more abstract, so it makes sense that the answer is too, but that does help shine some light on it. looks like we're a few minutes over time, so I don't want to keep you any longer, but thank you so much for taking the time to come and speak with us today. We really appreciate it. Thanks for addressing a lot of the questions, if not all of them, that we submitted. I think it was definitely helpful for me as a potential pre-law student, and I hope for our other interns it was helpful for them as well. Ivan says thank you so much. It was so helpful.
Thank you. Did everyone find this helpful? Just to be clear, yes, I hope so. And yes, I tried to frame it in a way that it was clumping these questions together and hopefully addressing the overwhelming majority. But I do want to say everyone here is absolutely welcome to contact me here. Again, my name is Isabel Moreno. You can find me, unfortunately, on our website. I say unfortunately because it's weird when you get to the point where you can be Googled, right? And so so yes, you can find me on our website. All of my contact information is there. If you want me to expand on anything there, we also have the opportunity for you to schedule now, starting today, in-person visits as well as virtual visits, so we can, expand on anything else. And if you guys need anything else, we're absolutely here to help address any questions or concerns. And thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Awesome. Thank you for coming. Talk to you later.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.